It was an ordinary day at the community center, a place filled with the sounds of children laughing, people chatting, and the occasional piano playing in the corner. The building had always been a sanctuary for those who needed it most. For many, it was a refuge from the harshness of the world outside. Among the volunteers, one person stood out, an individual who had become almost a staple of the center. She wasn't rich and she didn't have a big name, but she had something far more valuable, a heart full of compassion and a deep love for music. Her life hadn't been easy. It was a struggle every day just to get by. She worked long hours at a local diner, serving meals to people who barely acknowledged her presence. She picked up odd jobs wherever she could. But despite the exhaustion, she always found time to visit the community center in the evenings. It was a place where she could forget about her worries and, in turn, give back to others. The piano in the corner had become her solace. It was her way of expressing herself, her way of letting go of all the stress and sorrow that built up during the day. On this particular afternoon, as the clock ticked past 3 p.m., she was playing one of her favorite songs, a soft, soothing melody. The music flowed from her fingers almost as though it was speaking to her soul. She had played this tune countless times, but it always brought her a sense of peace. As the last note rang out, she looked up and noticed someone standing by the door. It was a young girl no older than 15 with tears in her eyes. She looked lost, like she was carrying a burden far heavier than anyone her age should have to bear. The girl hesitated for a moment before walking into the room. She sat on one of the chairs nearby, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her jacket. The woman felt a wave of sympathy for her and stood up to offer some comfort. "Hey," she said softly, her voice kind but gentle. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up startled, but then she nodded slowly. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her face told a different story. "Just, things have been hard lately." Without asking too many questions, the woman sat down on the bench beside her. She knew what it felt like to be weighed down by life, to feel like no one understood. So instead of pushing the girl to talk, she simply started playing the piano again. The music was quiet at first, almost as if it were a secret, a quiet lullaby meant to calm the soul. The girl listened, her eyes drifting closed as the notes filled the room. She had never heard a song like this before. It was like the music was speaking to her, telling her that everything would be okay. The melody had a way of wrapping around her, pulling her into a place of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Minutes passed, and slowly, the girl's tears began to dry up. She felt lighter, as if the burden she had been carrying had been lifted, if only for a moment. She didn't know how or why, but the music had worked its magic. It was as if the woman playing the piano had an invisible power, one that soothed the pain inside her heart. When the song came to an end, the woman stopped playing and turned to the girl. "You know, you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to," she said kindly. "But if you ever need someone to listen, I'm here." The girl looked at her, her eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaky but sincere. "I didn't know what to do. I felt so alone." The woman smiled warmly. "You're never alone here. This is a place for everyone who needs it." The girl wiped her eyes again and looked up at the piano, almost as if she were seeing it for the first time. She had always known about the community center, but had never come in before. Now, something inside her was telling her that this was where she needed to be. As the woman stood up to leave, she noticed a figure standing in the doorway. A man dressed in a suit with a serious expression on his face. He wasn't someone she recognized, but the way he carried himself made it clear that he wasn't from around here. He looked at the girl sitting by the piano and then at her, his gaze intense. He cleared his throat before speaking. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. "But I couldn't help but overhear." The woman felt a pang of nervousness in her chest. Was this man going to complain about the noise? Was he one of those people who didn't understand the value of art or music in a community like this? But the man didn't seem upset. In fact, there was something almost fascinated in his eyes. "That was beautiful," he said, his tone softening. "I don't know who you are, but that music—" He paused for a moment as if searching for the right words. "It really struck a chord with me." She blinked, taken aback. Thank you," she said, unsure of how to respond. The man stepped further into the room, his eyes still fixed on her. "I've been watching you for a while now," he said. "I've been observing how you interact with the people here, and I've got to say you have something Special? She frowned, confused. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to the girl who was still sitting silently, her face now a little less sad. You know, the man said to her, you're lucky to have someone like her around. Not everyone has that kind of heart. The girl nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. The man's gaze returned to the woman at the piano. I've seen a lot in my time, he continued, his voice low and steady, but it's rare to come across someone like you. Someone who doesn't seek attention, who just gives without expecting anything in return. The woman felt a wave of discomfort wash over her. I'm just trying to do what I can, she said, her voice modest. Nothing special. The man smiled slightly, a hint of admiration in his eyes. What you're doing here, it's more than just playing music. You're making a difference in people's lives, whether you realize it or not. There was a long pause as the woman took in his words. She didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to compliments, especially from someone who seemed so important, so out of place in the humble community center. But the sincerity in his voice made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The man looked at the girl one last time, as if ensuring she was okay. Then he turned to leave, but before he did, he glanced over his shoulder at the woman. You might not realize it now, he said, but you've just changed someone's life. Don't ever underestimate the power of kindness. And with that, he left, leaving the woman standing there, still uncertain of the man's intentions, but feeling something inside her stir. She had no idea who he was, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something unexpected. The next few days passed in a blur for the woman at the community center. She continued her usual routine, working long hours at the diner, stopping by the center and playing the piano whenever she could. But something felt different now. The conversation with the man who had left such an impression on her lingered in her mind. Who was he? What did he mean when he said that she had made a difference? She tried to shake it off. After all, she was just doing what she always did, helping where she could. It wasn't anything special, but deep down she wondered if maybe there was more to it, something she hadn't quite understood yet. She didn't have time to dwell on it. Her life was filled with too many challenges to focus on mysteries she couldn't solve. That afternoon, as she was playing the piano again, a familiar face walked into the community center. It was the young girl, the one who had been sitting by the piano, her eyes red from crying. This time the girl looked different. She wasn't as sad as she had been before. She had a small but noticeable smile on her face. The woman smiled at her as she continued playing, letting the soft notes fill the room. Hey there, she said, her voice warm and inviting. How are you doing today? The girl hesitated for a moment, then sat down beside her, her smile growing a little wider. I'm okay, she said. Better than before, at least. The woman nodded, her fingers still gliding over the piano keys. That's good to hear. For a moment, they sat in silence, the music creating a peaceful atmosphere around them. The girl seemed to be lost in the melody, her eyes closed as she absorbed the sounds. The woman had no idea what was going on in her mind, but she could sense that the music was helping. It always did. Finally, the girl spoke again, her voice quieter than before. I wanted to say thank you for playing. It helped me a lot. The woman stopped playing for a moment, turning to look at her. You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I could be here for you. The girl's eyes glistened with emotion. No, really, I mean it. I didn't know what to do. Everything at home is just really hard right now. My parents keep fighting, and I don't know where I fit in anymore. I felt like no one cared. The woman's heart ached as she listened. She knew what it felt like to be alone in a world that seemed indifferent. I get it, she said softly. Life can be tough, and sometimes it feels like everything is falling apart. But you're not alone here. This is a place where you can be yourself. You don't have to pretend to be okay if you're not. The girl nodded, a small tear slipping down her cheek. I wish things were different. I don't know how to make it stop. The woman reached over and gently placed a hand on the girl's shoulder, offering what little comfort she could. I don't have all the answers, she said. But sometimes just taking it one step at a time is enough. And if you ever need to talk, I'm here. The girl didn't respond immediately. Instead, she seemed to be lost in thought. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter than before. I don't know what my dad would think if he knew I was here. He doesn't understand why I like coming here. He says it's a waste of time. The woman paused, surprised by the mention of the girl's father. She hadn't expected to hear about him, but she could understand the conflict. It was hard for parents to always understand their children's needs, especially when they themselves were caught up in their own problems. "Maybe your dad just doesn't understand yet," she said gently. "Sometimes people need time to see things from a different perspective. But if this place helps you, then it's not a waste of time. It's important to take care of yourself too." The girl looked up at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "I guess you're right." Before the conversation could continue, the door to the community center opened again, and the man, the one who had spoken to the woman a few days earlier, walked in. This time he didn't stand by the door. He stepped into the room fully, his eyes scanning the space until they landed on the woman and the girl sitting together by the piano. "Hello again," he said, his voice calm, yet strong. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." The woman looked up, surprised to see him again. She hadn't expected to run into him so soon. The girl, on the other hand, seemed to recognize him immediately, her expression changing slightly. "No, you're not interrupting," the woman said, a little unsure of what to expect from him now. "We were just talking." The man nodded, walking toward them. He looked down at the girl for a moment before turning to the woman. "I wanted to talk to you for a moment," he said, his tone serious yet friendly. "If you have time." The woman glanced at the girl, who seemed to be lost in thought. "Sure," she said, standing up and following the man to a quieter corner of the room. "What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation," he said, his gaze intense but thoughtful. "And I've come to realize something important. You have a gift, one that not many people have. Your ability to connect with others, especially through music, is rare. I've seen a lot of people try to help others, but there's something about the way you do it. It's genuine. It's real." The woman felt a wave of unease wash over her. She had never thought of herself as special. She had always just tried to do what she could to get by and help others along the way. But hearing him speak about her like this made her uncomfortable. "I don't know about all that," she said, shrugging. "I'm just trying to make a difference, even if it's small." The man's eyes softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's the thing. Even small acts of kindness can make a huge difference in someone's life. And I believe you're capable of so much more than you think." She wasn't sure how to respond to that. She had never considered herself capable of making a big impact on anyone's life. She was just one person, struggling like everyone else. But the sincerity in his words made her pause. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what to say, but thank you." The man gave her a small, understanding smile. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that you're doing something meaningful here. And people notice it even if they don't always show it." Before she could respond, the girl walked over to them, her eyes thoughtful but more peaceful than they had been before. "I think I'm ready to go now," the girl said, her voice steady. "Thank you for everything." The woman smiled and nodded. "You take care of yourself, okay? And remember, you're always welcome here." As the girl walked out with the man, the woman returned to the piano, her thoughts swirling. The conversation had left her feeling unsettled, but in a way that pushed her to think more deeply about the impact she was having. Could she really be making a difference? Was she capable of doing more than she thought? As the last notes of her song echoed through the empty room, she realized that sometimes even the smallest gestures could have the biggest effects. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope for herself and those around her. The following week passed in a blur. The woman continued her routine, moving between the diner, the community center, and the small apartment she called home. Life felt, for the most part, unchanged. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't forget the conversation she'd had with the man. Nor could she shake the feeling that something was shifting inside her. For the first time in a long while, she questioned the path she was on. Could there be more to her life than just surviving? Could she actually be making a difference, no matter how small? The young girl who had come to the center for comfort continued to show up regularly. She often sat near the piano, watching the woman play, sometimes with a smile on her face, sometimes with a far-off look in her eyes. The woman had started to look forward to these moments, even if they were brief. The music seemed to help both of them, creating a space where they didn't need to talk but simply be. Yet there was something different about the girl now, a quiet strength in her that hadn't been there before. One afternoon, After the girl had finished a session of sitting and listening to the music, she approached the woman with a look of resolve in her eyes. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice firm but calm. "I want to help people the way you do. I want to do something that matters. I think I've been so focused on my own problems for so long that I forgot there are others who need help too." The woman looked at her, touched by the girl's words. It was clear she had been through a lot, but this new sense of purpose seemed to shine through the cracks of her pain. It was a beautiful thing to witness. "That's a powerful realization," the woman replied softly. "But remember, it doesn't have to be anything huge. Small acts of kindness can go a long way." The girl smiled, her eyes bright with a spark of hope. "I know. I just want to make a difference." As the days passed, the girl began to help out more around the community center. She started by organizing small events for the younger kids, helping them with crafts and activities. The woman noticed a change in her. She wasn't the quiet, withdrawn girl who had first walked into the center. She was confident, engaged, and for the first time in a while, she seemed genuinely happy. But something else was happening as well. The woman's interactions with the man, the one who had observed her from a distance, became more frequent. He would occasionally stop by the center, usually when it was quiet, to sit with her for a few minutes. His presence was comforting, though it left her feeling uneasy, unsure of his intentions. He seemed to understand her in ways she couldn't fully explain, but she couldn't help but wonder what he truly wanted. One afternoon, after a particularly long shift at the diner, the woman sat down at the piano, her fingers lightly grazing the keys. It was one of those rare moments when she could finally relax, her mind quieting for just a moment. But before she could get lost in the music, the door creaked open. She looked up, and to her surprise, it was the man standing in the doorway. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said with a small smile, stepping into the room. "I know you like your time alone, but I wanted to talk to you." The woman set her hands in her lap, surprised by his sudden appearance. She nodded, gesturing for him to sit. "I'm glad you came. What's on your mind?" He paused before taking a seat across from her, his gaze focused on the piano for a moment. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low but clear. "I've been watching you, and I've come to a decision. I think it's time for you to stop just surviving and start truly living." She raised an eyebrow, confused by his words. "What do you mean by that?" "You've been doing great work here, but you've also been holding yourself back. You have potential, more than you realize, and I want to help you reach it." The woman's heart raced as she tried to process what he was saying. "Help me?" she repeated, her voice cautious. "Why would you want to do that?" He leaned forward, his tone earnest. "Because I believe in what you're doing here, and I want to see you do more. I want to give you the opportunity to make a bigger impact, to reach more people. You have a gift, and you deserve a chance to share it with the world." She sat back, stunned. This was exactly the kind of offer she had never imagined would come her way. But as tempting as it was, something inside her hesitated. She didn't want to be swept away by promises of grandeur. She didn't want to be taken away from what she loved, the community center, the people she had come to care about, and the simple act of playing music for those in need. "I don't know," she began, her voice trailing off. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of change. This place is where I belong. It's not about being noticed. It's about helping." The man's eyes softened. "I understand. But you don't have to leave what you're doing here to make a difference. You can continue helping people here while also expanding your reach. Imagine what you could do with more resources, more people supporting you." The idea lingered in her mind, but it didn't sit right. There was something about his words that felt too polished, too rehearsed. She didn't want to get caught up in something that might take her away from the life she had built. No matter how difficult it was, she had spent so much time making do with what little she had, and it was working. She was making a difference, even if it was in small ways. "Thank you for the offer," she said after a long pause. "But I think I need to stay here. This is where I'm needed." The man didn't seem disappointed, but his expression remained serious. "I understand. Just know that the world is waiting for you to step up. Don't let fear hold you back." She nodded, unsure of what to say next. "I'll think about it. But for now, I'm happy here." He stood, offering a small smile before turning to leave. "I'll be here if you change your mind." As he left the room, the woman let out a long breath. The weight of his words hung in the air, but she still felt rooted in her decision. She wasn't ready for a bigger life, not yet. She still had too much to give to the people here, to the girl who was finding her voice, and to herself. That evening, as she sat alone at the piano, the music seemed to speak to her in a new way. The melodies were no longer just a form of escape. They had become her voice, her way of connecting with the world. She knew she wasn't finished with her journey, but for now, this was where she was meant to be, and that for the moment was enough. The next few weeks were quieter than the woman had expected. The decision to stay at the community center and continue her work there felt right, but it also left her with a sense of uncertainty. She knew she wasn't living the life of luxury or fame that others might have imagined for her, but there was something deeply fulfilling about the small moments, the quiet conversations with people who needed someone to listen, the smiles she got from the kids who came to the center, and the peaceful music she played when everything else seemed to fade away. The girl, who had been attending the center regularly, had continued to grow. She now helped with organizing activities and had become an active part of the community, showing the same care and warmth the woman had shown her. It made the woman proud to see how far the girl had come. She had blossomed, and it was clear that her time at the center had made a difference. One day, as the woman was finishing up a particularly busy shift at the diner, she returned to the center looking forward to a quiet evening with her music. She had become accustomed to these moments of solitude, where she could just let go and play without distractions. But when she walked in, she found the girl standing by the piano, her arms crossed and an uncertain expression on her face. "Hey," the woman greeted her, her voice soft but warm. "Everything okay?" The girl hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began. "About making a difference. I think I'm ready to do more. I don't want to just sit around anymore." The woman sat down beside her, noticing the determination in the girl's eyes. It was the same fire she had seen in her when she first started coming to the center, but now it seemed even stronger. "That's great," the woman said with a smile. "But remember, making a difference doesn't always mean doing something huge. Small things matter too." The girl nodded, but her expression remained serious. "I know, but I think I need to step up. I've been talking to my parents, and I realize that I want to do something that really matters. I don't want to be stuck in the same place forever. I want to help people like you do." The woman felt a sense of pride swell in her chest. She hadn't realized just how much of an impact she had made on the girl. In a way, the girl had become like a daughter to her, someone she cared for deeply. But at the same time, she understood how important it was for the girl to find her own path. It wasn't about being like her. It was about finding what she was truly passionate about. "You're already doing something amazing here," the woman said gently. "But if you feel ready to do more, then go for it. Just remember that helping people doesn't always require a grand gesture. It's the small things that add up." The girl smiled, looking relieved. "Thanks. I just needed to hear that." As the conversation wrapped up, the woman couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the girl's growth. She had come so far, and now she was ready to take the next step in her life. It was a reminder of why she did what she did. The small acts of kindness, the encouragement, the music, all of it mattered. It was these moments that made everything worth it. Later that evening, the woman found herself sitting alone at the piano, reflecting on everything that had happened. She thought about the man who had approached her weeks ago, offering her a chance to step into a world that seemed so foreign to her. He had promised her opportunities, a life she had never dreamed of. But every time she thought about his words, she felt a sense of discomfort. She didn't want a life of fame or wealth. What she wanted, more than anything, was to keep doing the work that mattered, helping the people around her in whatever way she could. She had made the right choice, she reminded herself. This was where she was meant to be. Helping people, playing music, making connections. It wasn't about seeking attention or approval. It was about the quiet impact she could have on the lives of others. The sound of the piano filled the room, and for a moment, everything felt at peace. The music had always been her escape, her way of expressing everything that words couldn't. As she played, she realized something: the simple moments, the ones that often went unnoticed, were the ones that truly mattered. She didn't need a big stage or a large audience to make a difference. She had already found her place. But just as she was lost in the music, the door to the community center opened and the man walked in again. She had seen him a few times since their last conversation, but each encounter had left her feeling more uneasy. She wasn't sure what he wanted from her, or if he truly understood why she had chosen the life she was living. He wasn't like the people she was used to. His world was one of wealth and privilege, a world that felt so far removed from hers. But as he stepped into the room, his usual confident demeanor softened. He didn't approach her with the same intensity as before. Instead, he simply stood there watching her play for a moment. "That's beautiful," he said quietly, his voice almost reverent. "You have a real gift." She stopped playing, glancing up at him. "Thank you. But you already know that. You've heard me play before." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I don't think I fully understood it until now," he said. "I've been thinking. I wanted to apologize for how I came across the last time we spoke. I pushed you to make a decision I don't think you were ready to make." The woman was taken aback by his words. She hadn't expected an apology, especially not from someone like him. But as she looked at him, she saw something different in his eyes, a softness she hadn't noticed before. "It's okay," she said, her voice calm. "I appreciate the offer, but I think I made the right choice. I belong here with the people who need me." He nodded slowly as if he were processing her words. "I understand. I respect that. I've been wondering if maybe there's more I could do to help you with what you're doing here. Not to take you away from this place, but to support it in a way that lets you continue what you're doing." The woman frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I've seen how much you've given to this center, to the people here, and I think it's time you got the recognition you deserve. There's a lot of good that can be done here, and I want to be a part of it." She wasn't sure what to make of his words. Was he trying to buy her out of her life here, offering money or resources in exchange for her approval? The thought made her uncomfortable, but there was something genuine in his tone, something that told her he wasn't trying to take anything away from her. "I'm not doing this for recognition," she said firmly. "I'm here because it's where I belong. I don't need anything more than that." He looked at her with a mixture of admiration and understanding. "I can see that, and I respect your choice. But if you ever change your mind, just know that you have my support." With that, he left, his footsteps echoing in the quiet space. The woman sat at the piano for a while longer, letting the sound of the keys fill the room once again. She knew her decision was right. She wasn't looking for fame or fortune. She was here, doing what she loved, helping others in ways that mattered. That was enough for her. The days that followed the conversation with the man felt different for the woman. There was a quiet shift inside her, a recognition that she had made the right choice, even if it hadn't been the one that most people would consider ambitious. She wasn't interested in fame, nor did she care for the kind of life the man had tried to offer her. Instead, she found joy in the quiet moments, playing the piano, helping those in need, and being a steady presence in the community center. These were the things that brought her peace, and that peace had become more precious to her than any material success. The girl, too, seemed to be finding her own way. With her newfound confidence, she began to take on more responsibility at the center. She organized activities for the children, helped with the outreach programs, and even started a small group to teach others about the importance of music in their lives. It wasn't the grand change the woman had once imagined for herself, but it was something. And it was enough. One morning, as the woman was getting ready to leave for work, she received a call. It was from the community center's director, who asked her to come in for a meeting. She was surprised. Meetings like this didn't happen often. With a sense of curiosity and a little bit of apprehension, she agreed to meet the director that afternoon. When she arrived at the center, she was greeted by the director, who had a warm but serious look on her face. "I'm glad you could come in," the director said. "There's something important we need to discuss." The woman followed her into the small office where they sat down across from each other. The director leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "You've been doing an amazing job here. I've seen how much you've given to this place, and I think it's time we recognize that." The woman blinked, not quite understanding. "What do you mean?" "We've been talking about ways to grow the center, expand the outreach programs, and provide more services to the community. You've been such a big part of what makes this place work, and we think it's time for you to take on a more official role. We want you to be a part of the leadership team." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The woman felt a mixture of emotions, pride, uncertainty, and a hint of disbelief. This wasn't something she had ever expected, nor had she ever sought it. But there was something about it that felt right. She had spent so much of her life thinking small, focused only on the immediate needs around her, that the idea of a bigger responsibility seemed almost out of reach. But now here it was being handed to her. I don't know what to say, the woman stammered, unsure of what this would mean for her. I never thought of myself as a leader. The director smiled. That's the thing. You don't have to be anything other than what you already are. You've already been leading by example. Your heart, your dedication, it's what this place needs. People look up to you. They respect you. The woman was quiet for a long moment, her thoughts swirling. She never thought of herself as a leader, but she realized that perhaps that was what she had been doing all along. Leading, not with authority or power, but through kindness, consistency, and the willingness to give. She wasn't just playing the piano anymore. She was teaching others, guiding them, offering them something that they might not find elsewhere. I'll do it, she said finally, her voice firm but warm. I'll help however I can. The director smiled, relief in her eyes. I knew you would. We'll start small, but I think this is the beginning of something great. A few weeks later, the woman found herself in her new role. She wasn't in charge of everything. There were still others who managed the larger tasks. But she was now part of the team that made the big decisions, and her input was valued. It felt different, but in a way that made her feel proud. She was making a difference, not just in the small everyday moments, but in ways that could impact more people. Her work at the center was finally being recognized, not because she wanted it to be, but because it had to be. The community needed someone who cared enough to guide it forward, and now she was that person. The girl who had been her close companion through it all continued to flourish in her own right. She had found her passion in helping others, and her leadership skills were becoming more apparent every day. The woman couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in how far the girl had come. She had once been a lost soul, looking for solace, and now she was a beacon of hope for others. She had become the kind of person she had always wanted to be, someone who could help, who could lead, and who could make the world a better place, one step at a time. One evening, as the woman was playing a soft melody on the piano, the girl came in, her face lit up with excitement. I did it, she exclaimed, her voice full of joy. The woman paused, looking up at her. Did what? I've been talking to some of the local schools, the girl said, her words spilling out in excitement. And we're going to start a music program for kids who don't have access to instruments or lessons. I can't believe it's actually happening. The woman felt a smile spread across her face. That's amazing, she said, her heart swelling with pride. You're doing great things. I'm so proud of you. The girl beamed, and for a moment they both stood there savoring the quiet joy of knowing that they were making a real difference. It wasn't about recognition or accolades, it was about the lives they were touching, the hearts they were opening, and the community they were building. And in that moment, the woman realized something profound. The choice she had made to stay at the community center, to continue working in the way that felt right for her, was not a small one. It had led her to a place she had never imagined, leading others, helping to create something lasting, and building a future where kindness and music could heal. Looking at the girl, she knew that this was just the beginning. They were both part of something bigger than themselves, and no matter where the future took them, they had already found the most important thing of all: purpose. And it had been there all along, in the quiet moments, the simple acts of kindness, and the music that brought them together. Have ever given herself,